There is so much misinformation right at our fingertips. Now, more than ever, I'm seeing buyers who are super confused or scared, afraid to make any moves. And I'm also seeing buyers who are overly confident, but with the absolute wrong information. Curious which camp you fall in? First of all, it's not your fault. There are tons of conflicting articles, news stories, and rumors floating all around. So let's break down some interesting data that came out from an article on NerdWallet this year. NerdWallet did a survey at the beginning of the year, and what they found is that 8 in 10 Americans said that buying a home is a top priority. Of that survey, 28 million, or 11%, said that that is a top priority within the next 12 months. While it's phenomenal that people still believe in home ownership, and I of course am completely for it, there are some massive gaps that we have to address. There are a ton of buyers out there right now that have very unrealistic expectations. According to the article, 11% of Americans plan on buying a home in the next 12 months. And those prospective buyers hope to spend $269,200 on average. This is significantly lower than the typical home price as of October 2022, which was $379,100, according to the National Association of Realtors. So you can see there's already a massive gap that I and a lot of other realtors are trying to bridge with our buyers. In Alachua County right now, the data that just came out from Florida Realtors says that the average sales price is $381,041. And while some areas of the country have seen price declines, it's still well above that $269 mark that a lot of buyers are coming in at. And that's not to say that you don't have a higher, more realistic budget, but there's a lot of numbers you need to pay attention to. I'm finding that I'm just having to overcome and readdress these unrealistic expectations with a lot of my customers. Remember, the average person stays in their home 10 years or less. So the home you're going to buy is not forever, it's for right now. Another misconception that I'm having to educate my customers on is the market. That same article that I referenced earlier found that nearly 2/3 of Americans say that a crash is imminent in the next 3 years. And that article from NerdWallet goes on to say, most expect a housing market crash. 2/3, or 67% of Americans, say that a housing market crash is imminent in the next 3 years. Let's talk about that. For a crash to happen, we'd have to see two things occur. The first is we'd have to see a massive influx of homes available for sale, either through new construction or from homeowners deciding to sell their houses. At the same time, we'd also have to see buyer demand dip. Buyers getting out of the market, more homes coming for sale is where that flip would occur. Now, it would have to happen in massive quantities for a crash. We could see a correction, but for a crash, everybody would need to sell and nobody would want to buy. Holden Lewis, a home and mortgage expert from NerdWallet, says, home prices have already been falling, especially on the West Coast, and prices will fall in some cities in 2023. But a drop in home prices isn't necessarily a crash. Home values went up around 40% from the middle of 2020 to the middle of 2022. So most homeowners will have equity even if prices fall 10 or 20%. A price decline of that magnitude would be uncomfortable for homeowners, but it would bring out the buyers. I want you to remember that last part. A price correction may not be super exciting for sellers, but it doesn't mean a crash. A price correction doesn't mean that you're going to get a house half off. A price correction doesn't mean that the world is falling apart. It means that what we saw over the pandemic years was so massive and so large that it had to come back down to a more normal range. A lot of these corrections and prices do depend on your geographical location. Larger cities, for example, are probably going to see a bit more of a decline, whereas in Florida, people are still coming here in droves, so there's still a lot of demand in our area. And in our area, we are still in a seller's market. The latest data that came out from Florida Realtors says that we have 1.9 months of inventory in Alachua County. That means if nobody else listed a house for sale, we'd be out of homes in less than 2 months. We don't hit an equal balanced market until we get about 4 to 6 months. We don't hit a buyer's market until we get over 6 months in inventory. It's going to take years. And in the meantime, what are you doing? Paying rent? Someone else's mortgage? What are you waiting for? So you have some, not all, but you have some buyers who do not have the proper budget in mind, and sellers who still have the advantage of demand for their houses. What then? Interest rates have recently risen higher than many of us have seen in our adult lives. But it doesn't mean that the current interest rate is unprecedented. At the time of this filming, rates are currently around 6.5% to 6.75%. Yes, that's higher than most of us have seen, but that's not unprecedented. Rates like this have existed, and rates much higher than this have existed. Historically, if you look over the last 50 years, according to Freddie Mac, the average interest rate on a 30-year loan is 7.75%. While it seems rare to see an interest rate that starts with a 6, what I actually think was more of an anomaly were the 2 and 3 and maybe even 4% rates that we saw during the pandemic. We got spoiled and that felt normal, but what I think is normal is where we're at right now. So if you're waiting to make a move on a house to see 2 or 3% interest rates again, I don't know how long you're gonna be sitting on the sideline. It could be forever. My goal is never to force you into buying a house if that's truly not the right thing for you. My goal is to present to you what's real, what's tangible, what is actually happening so that you don't miss out on an amazing opportunity because you had the wrong information. These misconceptions are so real right now, and I am trying with everything I have to rail against them so that you have what's real and what's true and can make a clear decision that's the best for you. And as I said in the beginning, these misconceptions that you've got, they're not necessarily your fault. The wrong information is floating around everywhere. And it doesn't help that this market right now is so stinking weird. That's the way I describe it right now. Weird. You want to know what's happening in the market? It's weird. I'm Lindsey Johnson, your resource for all things real estate. See you next time.